Hello and welcome to the Listen Up Accord Show. This is a brand new series brought to you by the Division of Youth in the Ministry of Youth, Sports and Community Empowerment. For this episode, I'm your host, Kobe Brooms. Over the course of this series, we will provide our young people with a platform to share their concerns, to share their thoughts, to share their opinions, but most importantly, their solutions. And it doesn't stop there. We will also engage guests who are experts in their related fields who will lead the discussion on topical issues facing our young people. On this first episode of the Listen Up Accord series, we will be dissecting life after incarceration. Stay tuned, we have a jam-packed program and a lot to uncover. We also have some giveaways as well, but I'll tell you a little bit more about that as we get on to the show. But I'll just encourage you to be engaged in our comment section, and the most engaged comment will get that prize. Today, we will be hearing from a young lady who spent over 12 years behind bars. And trust me, this is an experience that you don't want to miss out. Her name is Rachel Adams. We also have on the line today Miss Madupe Bodo. She's a senior program researcher at the Criminal Justice Research and Planning Unit with over 15 years experience in the field of criminology and criminal justice. And we also have the executive director of the Prison Fellowship, Neil Dowden. So be sure to listen up for the real talk and real conversation when we come back. Okay, and we are back. As we continue the show, as I said before, we want to hear from you. So we want you to drop your comments in the comment section that we can bring it on screen. And we also want to hear from you as well. So you can call the usual number 228-5562 or 228-5563 to share your thoughts on this conversation. But before we get to our expert panel, we have a message to share with you, the Ministry of Youth, as part of our anti-violence campaign. And this video is by Devon St. Hill, and it is about bullying.
Bullying is the most sinister thing you could do to someone. It's fun for you, but for the person, it's hell. Your burning words hurt, and their minds are scarred, and their memories embedded with a constant reminder of their traumatic encounter. But for you, it's a joke. Tell me, could you live with yourself knowing that you push a person so far they contemplate daily to take their own life at the hands of your so-called joke? You just see the surface and you don't see the scars and the pain you inflict, cause it's just a joke to call somebody 4 eyes, a nerd, blast them on the internet, or inflict physical abuse to the person. My question is, does it fill your body with adrenaline? Do you create some type of social dominance knowing that your words could make someone your puppet? Shaken from any words that come from your lips, you are a monster. Your worst nightmare. You suck their sanity out of their bodies. So tell me, why all the hate? Why do you prey on the innocent going about their day to day? See, the next time you decide to be a big bad bully, just remember, what's fun for boy is death for crap boy.
Wow, that was a very powerful message about bullying and about our actions, how they can impact other people. At this time, I'm going to introduce you now to the senior program researcher at the Criminal Justice Research and Planning Unit, Madupe. And as she comes on screen, we're just going to talk about some statistics from the probation department. Welcome, Madupe.
Thank you, Kobe.
Yes, please. So I have a pre-sentencing report by the probation department that listed out the categories of offenses in the year 2020, and 81% of those were committed by adult males, 7% by adult females, 9% by juvenile males, and 3% by juvenile females. And it goes down to list the category of offenses. So, Madupe, in your capacity as a researcher, what are some of the issues or problems of greatest concern which you believe have led to youth involvement in criminal activity?
Well, Kobe, I'll start by saying that there are a range of factors. It's not just one thing that will lead a young person down a criminal path. There are individual risk factors that we can talk about. There could be a history of violent victimization. It could be physical violence, sexual violence, emotional abuse. There's that exposure to violence and conflict in the family. We have young persons who would have been left behind by the education system. There's a lot of debate going on now since there's discussion about the end of the 11 plus examination. So we know that there are issues on that end and we're working to fix it. But imagine the young person then who leaves school, doesn't have any academic qualifications, doesn't develop a skill, and decides to resort to crime. We have students with learning disorders like ADHD, dyslexia. Some of these things can lead to very aggressive behaviors and generally poor academic performance. We have young persons involved with illegal substances, drugs and alcohol. We have mental health issues and general antisocial beliefs and attitudes. We have some young persons that are just anti-authority, whether it be their parents, police, persons in the workplace, the boss, they're anti-authority. So you have that natural aggression when it comes to authority. There are also family risk factors, and we can talk about child rearing attitudes. We have families where, on one hand, the emphasis is on physical punishment. So everything is a lash, is a slap. On the other hand, we have families that, anything goes, there are no boundaries. So we have, inconsistent disciplinary practices. And again, when it comes to parenting, there's some children that they have almost no emotional attachment to parents or caregivers. Poverty is a factor when we think about familial risk factors, and a history also on the side of the parents when it comes to substance abuse and criminality. There are also factors when it comes to association with peers. You hang out with delinquent peers, there's a likelihood of you becoming involved in delinquent activity. If you're rejected by those same peers, they may also lead you down that road. So, involvement in gangs is a concern. Lack of involvement in wholesome activities. That's why we encourage students at school, especially those young persons who just entered first form. You're going to school, join a club, get involved in some type of extracurricular activity. So, your time is gainfully used. You understand your civic responsibility. You feel you belong to something. And there are wider community risk factors. So we have, diminished employment opportunities, and obviously the pandemic has affected that even more. We have high concentrations of poverty, a high level of transiency. So today we by mommy, tomorrow we by daddy, next week we by granny. So you're always moving from house to house. So there's that high level of family disruption. And these factors are not, they're not just peculiar to the Barbadian youth. They're factors that we see across the region and international research, but we still are aiming to do some research so that we can kind of drill down on what is most concerning for our local situation.
Well, it's very interesting that you said that, because that puts into context the figures that I have before me with the probation department, which talks about the category offenses of those same young people. There were 35 out of them acts leading to death or intending to cause death, acts leading to harm or intending to cause harm to persons, injurious acts of a sexual nature, and all of those different types of things. So what are some of the problems of greatest concern to you as a researcher which lead to youth involvement in criminal activity?
Many of the things that I just mentioned. Again, with our local context, we understand the deficits with the education system. As I said, that is being worked on. And when it comes again to our education system and working with our young people from an early age, teaching conflict resolution, mediation skills, so that everything is not automatically a resort to violence, helping make healthy decisions, understand that your decisions have a consequence. So starting from that, very young age, and understanding where getting involved in delinquency could lead. And we also have to keep an eye on the issues regarding substance abuse. And we are also seeing levels of mental health issues cropping up. So from our end, those are the things that we think we really need to keep an eye on.
Okay, and definitely, the show today is about life after incarceration, and we can't talk about that without talking about recidivism. Is there a high level of recidivism? Well, explain to our viewers what is recidivism, and is there a high level of that among our young people?
If I can give a very simple definition, simply put, recidivism can be described as reoffending after having already made contact with the criminal justice system. So, for example, John Brown is released from prison today, say for theft, and by next week, he's on another theft charge or arrested for some of the criminal act. And in research, in criminological research, there are different ways to measure recidivism. So some persons measure it just on rearrest. Some persons measure it on reincarceration. When we did our research some years back, we did it with the inmate population. So we looked at reincarceration, and the level then was 68%, which is comparable to international standards. But we still need to remember that we're a small country, yeah. And we need to keep an eye on that. And for then, that point when we did the research, there were mostly property offenders who reoffended within the first 6 months being back out in society. And back then, persons who committed murder were less likely to recidivate. So we're seeing slight changes now in our recidivism, more the acts, but the current research needs to be done, but we don't think that the level is that far removed from what it was then.
Okay, and in terms now of rehabilitation, because we are talking about life after incarceration, in terms of that number being so high at 68%, is this a direct correlation between what some may perceive as a lack of rehabilitation coming out of correctional facilities, or are the two have no correlation?
There is some correlation. There is a link, and it's not just necessarily with the detention facilities. It's not just necessarily with prison, but you don't just go to prison. There are various parts of the system that you pass through before you go to the prison. So even in schools, you have your programs in schools. If you are, say, sent to the young people's detention center or government industrial school, there are also programs there. So there are interventions along the way that can be utilized before we get to the prison. But imagine the young person then who identifies with several of the factors we spoke about earlier. Imagine that person gets arrested and they go to prison. If nothing is done to address the root of that offending behavior, for example, if we don't tackle things like unemployment, the substance abuse, the association with delinquent peers, that feeling of, I don't belong, nobody cares about me. There's that high likelihood that once he or she leaves prison, that, they can easily return to that offending behavior. So rehabilitation definitely is linked to recidivism, and there is work to be done in that regard.
Okay, and I want to ask, turn the conversation a little bit to our juvenile justice system. It comes in, it goes, criticism comes and goes. We talk about reform. Is that something that is currently in the works?
Yes, definitely. The main issues with our juvenile justice system surround disharmony with the various pieces of legislation. Who is a child, who is a juvenile, who's a young person. So you might find we have children, young persons who may find themselves on the wrong side of the law. And we have acts like the Juvenile Offenders Act and the Reformatory and Industrial Schools Act that provide that legal framework for how best to deal with such offenders. It just so happens that some aspects of our legislation go against international standards. For example, the Convention on the Rights of the Child. So there's a lacuna in, let's say, that 16 to 18 category where you're too old for one side of the system and you're too young for the other. But yes, there is reform on the way. There's been tremendous work done over the years. In 2019, Cabinet actually approved a new juvenile justice bill, and the features fully conform with the Convention on the Rights of the Child, the age of criminal responsibility will be moved to 12 years old. A juvenile will be classified as 12 to 18 years old. So we no longer have status offenses. So you won't hear about wandering being an offense. There will be systems in place to deal with the factors that cause the behavior. So detention will still be a last resort. It won't be automatic, oh, you're going to Dodds, you're going to Somerville. You want to nip it in the bud and deal with that. As I said, that was causing the conflict. They're encouraged, the judicial system is encouraged to use more alternatives to imprisonment when it comes to the Penal Reform Act. So things like restorative justice is pushed. We're not looking to be punitive. So there's a diversion from the formal court system to an informal one. So you encourage the involvement of the family. So there are things like family group conferencing, family time order. Victims have a chance to express to the actual juvenile offender how the crime made them feel, and the child is made accountable for his or her actions, and accountability is a key part of the restorative justice system. So mainly though, we look to the act is going to promote a speedy trial. So within 6 months, you don't have cases for young persons dragging through the courts for a long time. You're looking at 6 months and your case is dealt with so that you can move on. And most importantly, something that affects both young offenders and adults, persons who leave detention, whether it be the government issued school or prison, remove that stigma from the offender in respect of being a criminal. Because we know society can be unforgiving, but you've been to prison, you've done your time, and you're coming out now to make a valuable contribution to society, and you should be given that opportunity to do so. And those are some of the main features, but definitely reform is on the way.
Thank you so much, Modupe, for sharing with us that perspective. But don't go anywhere, because we're going to be continuing our conversation when we come back from this very, very short break.
No problem.
Richelle is on. Thank you so much for joining us again on this Listen Up Accord series. We just heard from senior researcher at the Criminal Justice Research and Planning Unit. We want to encourage you, those of you who are watching on social media, to drop your comments in the comment section. Join the discussion here online, here on the program at 228-5562 or 228-5563. We want to hear your thoughts. Life after incarceration, juvenile justice reform, young people being involved in criminal activity. All of these topics are linked to this particular discussion, and we want to hear from you. What are your thoughts? What are your opinions? What are your solutions? But before we get to that point, we have on the line with us Miss Richelle Thomas. Richelle Adams.
Hi,
Richelle, how are you doing today?
I'm fine, thanks. And you?
I am good as well. Now, I told the audience that you have an extremely powerful story about coming out, being incarcerated, and coming out and being successful. But before we get to that part of the experience, we just want to introduce you to the public of Barbados. So just tell us a little bit about yourself.
My name is Richelle Adams. I am 32 years old. I am the owner of Rehive The Experience, a salon. I am also a trainer. I've trained with the Potter Center, and I'm also a student at the University of the West Indies in the subject of social work.
Okay, thank you so much, Richelle, for sharing that with us. Now, as I mentioned, you spent about 12 years incarcerated. Once you came out, you had several opportunities in terms of jobs. You went to work with a halfway house and then into the beauty and boutique industry. Now, what I want to ask you is, because we're going to keep it real today, how was that experience for you? Because I know sometimes as a people we may be a little judgy based on when we hear somebody has now come out of prison. How was that experience for you?
When I went to the halfway house, it was not a mental atmosphere due to the people being, they were rehabilitated as well. They were in a different form, but they were also in a state of rehabilitation. Within the commercial aspect, that was very different for me because my co-workers were made aware of the fact that I was incarcerated by the owner of the business. And the treatment was a little, people were a little judgmental. People thought that I did not fit the mold. I should have behaved this way, I should have spoken this way, I should have dressed a certain way due to the length of my incarceration.
Okay, and in terms now of you've been able to stay on the straight and narrow path and you've been able to open a business. Tell me about that experience of how you were able to, resist temptation or to stand above the judgmental aspects of what people thought about you to become successful now.
For me, it was mind over matter, and who matters doesn't mind. So for me, it took a while, and it's a constant battle because you live with the fact that you have done something wrong. You've changed other people's life, and you've changed your life as well. So for me, being rejected in the job market, because I'm very qualified, but being rejected in the job market over and over, I had no choice but to seek employment because 12 years is a very long time. And I am not going back to prison. I'm not going back to prison. That's the truth. I'm not going back. So then I would have been a part of a lot of organizations because I would have had I was incarcerated. I would have been able to finish my key examinations, come out into society, met a lot of good people. And then I am a part of the youth entrepreneurship scheme. I'm also part of BYBT, and they would have helped me to chart on my path so that I would be a part of inclusive society. I'm also part of the hub that's a part of the Roman Catholic. They played a major role in me being able to step into the university as a student.
Okay, and you were on the line when Madupe was giving the statistics about the level of recidivism, especially among young people, being about 68%. And she spoke about several issues, a wide section of issues that would cause that to be. No, some would say you're an exception to the rule, but what from a perspective of somebody who has been on the inside, what are some of the main things that you see come out for people going in or going back into to prison after they've come out?
Self-esteem issues, that's definitely a key factor. Support systems, because sometimes due to the crime, some families fear the individual. If the person has spent a long time incarcerated, there is no communication. So there's a family breakdown. So sometimes it's hard for that person to come back into society and just blend in. Then is also a part of being institutionalized because you have been doing a particular routine for fun. You find it hard sometimes to blend back in. Employment opportunities. Sometimes the time for me, I always make it to interview stage. But whenever I am asked if I have ever committed an offense, and I say yes, and I share the nature of my offense and the length of time I was incarcerated, the changes, and that's the end of the interview for me.
Wow. And I'm guessing that pushed you then to your entrepreneurial activity and your entrepreneurial drive. But I want to ask you a little bit about the rehabilitation process. What was it like? Were the programs that you were involved in benefiting, or did you have to make that self-determination?
The program benefiting if you choose to do them. The has creative programs, but everybody is not able to access them. I would have been one of the lucky because our population is very small. I would have also already entered prison with 5 CICs. Well, 7. I would have had 7 CICs and they continued to get the others and my A levels because I would have been in the process of getting my levels. But I would have entered prison in 2006. I was not able to complete my A levels on 2013, where I did all 5 of my A levels, which would have been like 21 exams in that space of time because it was a very relaxed process. I was a part of NIFCA. I was a part of a lot of different activities, but it is mind over matter, as I said before, because there are people that believe in rehabilitation and there are others that think it's a waste of time. Everybody does not have the strong mindset to push past what other people think of them and decide what they want to do for themselves. So yes, rehabilitation programs are available, but is how you are able to access them and how you are able to apply them to your everyday life. Because it makes no sense me going to an etiquette class for an hour and then being amongst people that believe I shouldn't behave a certain way because I am an offender for 23 hours. That's a waste. It's basically a waste of time because the length of time you're with some person, you hold on to that longer than you hold on to the hour.
I got you. And in terms of when we were talking, you said that you are never going back. What was that? How has prison changed you overall that you've made that strong and firm commitment that you are never going back?
Well, I heard the speaker before. I do not want to mispronounce her name.
Madupe.
Speak of a particular type of person that enters the system. I did not fall into that mold. I was never in trouble with the law before. I was not delinquent in school. None of those things. So me being incarcerated was more, I was in something. I'm a woman. And if you look at female rape, a lot of the statistics don't do the female, but a lot of women are more involved to looking for love. If you do into our households is that, we have the figure, we never love to return the love that we are searching for. So then we make bad decisions because we want to feel from someone else. So not the student that will fall into that typical stereotype. Doesn't change me because it showed me no matter how educated you are, it didn't matter. You are just enough. You are just there to do your time. And prison is a mind game. I would not say it was treated badly. I would never say that I was not treated badly, but it was harsh. Especially for someone that's 17 years old, transition in adulthood, you go through the phase and you're trying to find you really cannot find an identity of being incarcerated because incarceration is conformity. So then you basically become the system.
And in terms now of when I was looking at the numbers from the probation department, it showed a great number of young people. And when we look at it from the newspapers and so on, and we see the amounts of young people who are going into the prison system, you went in fairly early, as you said, at 17. So I want to ask you, you have the platform now to speak to some young people. What advice would you give them as it relates to people who may be contemplating, who may be just this much away from engaging in criminal activity, which may land them behind bars?
Okay, so I'm going to speak to two sets of people. First, I speak to young people. Incarceration is very painful, especially when you do what our society will consider violent crimes. You destroy more than one set of people. You destroy yourself, you destroy your family, and you destroy the family of the person you have done an act to. Something very hard to live with for the rest of your life, because sometimes you feel that you do not deserve to be alive, or you don't deserve to be happy, or you don't deserve to be a part of everything due to the wrong that you had done before. So my advice would be to think twice speak to someone you believe can help, because a lot of our young people cry out for help, but they are not the right avenues for them to get the assistance. Everybody is not comfortable. Then I'm going to speak to parents and guardians and teachers. You have the first say. Sometimes, if we look at more successful people in the world, we will see some of them were bad behavior. Some of them weren't the brightest student in the world, but there was always that one person. There was always a mentor. There was always somebody that saw special something within them. And you hear a lot of people tell children a lot of hurtful that they don't realize they can send that child into depression. Sometimes we see children that are very young and we see them really sad, and a child kills themselves and somebody says, well, he ain't got no problems. But children do have problems because they're confused. They're not growing into who they need to be. And if they don't have the examples to follow, then that's where the problem comes, because we will idolize society. We will idolize stars. We listen to the rap songs and we listen to the music, but we don't realize that that's what they have come from. They've moved away from that. We idolize it because we can relate. That's what we see every day. So that we need, as a society, it's not just young alone, because young people try. There are some young people that are troubled, but things cause them to be troubled. They aren't born troubled. It's the issues. So that we need to tap into that a little more. Criminal justice system, find someone to do a mitigation between families, the court system, victims, so that when people go into the system, they're not lost. Because a lot of us within this system, due to communication, due to police being afraid because they don't on the situation, so they live in fear, and fear eventually becomes anger, resentment, frustration, and then people where to channel it. So that's where we get crime. That's where we get children being disrespectful. That's where we get people not listening, because they're saying, I am saying this, but nobody listens to me. So we need to take a step back and just listen a little more.
Listen a little bit more. And interestingly enough, that is the name of this program, Listen Up Accord. And we have a question from Facebook. Somebody's just asking you, how is life treating you now?
Life is not treating me bad at all. I found a partner, I have my own business, I go to the university, I have a circle of friends. Interestingly enough, my friends that were my friends when I was first incarcerated are still my friends, and we've been friends for 20 years. Like, I can say they've been by my side. They would have been a part of the situation in terms of being afraid. They didn't know what was happening as children, you don't understand, but they still are my friends to this day. My family is still here. They came to visit while I was incarcerated. So, like, it's just, I would like to be a voice to open. Yes, we did something wrong, and I will not deny. But I would like the opportunity, and those of us that would have made that mistake and want to come back into society, we would like that second chance. We would like to be a part of corporate Barbados. We would like to be upstanding citizens. But we can't get that second chance if there's so much judgment.
Judgment. Rochelle, I want to... Oh, there's one more question before we go. Chad Hazel says... more of a comment. He says, my name is Chad Hazel, and I went to the government industrial school at 11 years old. And I got 5 years at the industrial school for wandering. I would like an opportunity. And I think Madupe said that, before that they were looking at removing that type of offense from being criminal. And he also goes on to say that anybody can change their life. And Rochelle, I am very touched by the story that you shared, because particularly, sometimes we paint people with a brush, a very judgmental brush when they are incarcerated and when they come out. And the same experience that you had when you first came out, people being made aware of your situation and making life difficult, is something that we as a society have to sit down and do some reflection on, as we as we progress into the 21st century, 2021 and beyond. Richelle, I want you to stick around for the rest of the program. We're going to be inviting some callers, some Facebook and YouTube comments. We are going to be talking with Modupe a little bit more, but before we do that, and we are going to be having Mr. Neil Dowden, who's the president of the Barbados Prison Fellowship, coming on and sharing his experience as well. But before we do that, we want to remind you of tell you about what our giveaway prize will be. So up for grabs, Compliments Accra is a staycation for two. So what we want you to do is to go into the comment section. So even if you're at home watching, log on to the Division of Youth Facebook page and go make a comment about what you think. It could be a suggestion. It could be a comment about what has been happening so far. And the person who has the most engaging comment, we will be making contact with you. And just like that, you can get that staycation for two. We continue our conversation now with Mr. Neil Dowden. He's the head of the Barbados Prison Fellowship. But before we have that conversation, we're going to take a quick break here. Listen Up Accord series. We welcome Mr. Dowden now on the line. Mr. Dowden, how are you doing today?
I'm fine, thank you.
Fantastic. So you've sat back, you've listened to everything that has been said so far. We have it from the research perspective, we have it from Richelle, who has been in the system, and now you are intimately involved in this particular system of rehabilitation as well, going and fellowshipping with the persons who are incarcerated. What is your thought of everything that has been said so far? Has this been something that you and your organization have been seeing?
Unfortunately, it is. I would want to echo everything that Rachel said in terms of discrimination against offenders, ex-offenders, because they would have offended in prison, paid their dues, and then come back out of prison. But they're never given a chance by Society 1 and Corporate Barbados 2. So one of the biggest problems that we find is there's a lot of courses taught in prison. A lot of people get themselves qualified, come out of prison, and they cannot find anything to do because Corporate Barbados would not give them a chance. People carry a stigma when they come out of prison. As soon as you try to get them employed or you talk to employers, you'll find that they either lose the job if they don't tell the employer up front that they were in prison. I'll give you an example. There was an ex-offender that came out of prison. He got a job, and even after about 6 weeks, he was promoted because of the quality of work that he produced. As soon as somebody told the employer that he had been in prison, he lost his job the next week. And the problem there is an ongoing thing. We encourage ex-offenders to let the employers know upfront that you were incarcerated, you've paid your dues, and now you're coming back to make a meaningful contribution to society. But unfortunately, the things about Barbados is that we are not a very forgiving society. And even for people like myself and a lot of the volunteers in Prison Fellowship Barbados, we are stigmatized because they think that we are working with the lowest of the lowest. But if somebody doesn't work with ex-offenders, then the problem is that we're going to have serious in this country. And even our governmental organization would not employ some of these ex-offenders because of the fact that they were incarcerated. And some people are incarcerated for simple stuff, and because it's on their certificate, the police certificate of character, that's a barrier to getting a lot of the jobs that they can do and do properly. Because 75% of ex-offenders are not all violent criminals. They're not all went in for the various ideas. But the idea is that they can do certain jobs like security, minor security jobs, etc. If you're securing a site where it's just a site, then an ex-offender can do it. But he's not allowed to get a security license because he's got a criminal offense on his police educative character.
So, Mr.
So we
Dowden,
need to work on.
if I'm getting it correctly, it seems as if we are essentially saying that we want to rehabilitate, but by our very actions and policies, we aren't allowing for that facilitation, even in corporate and in government. Is that putting the nail on the head?
You've hit the nail on the head. And until we do something about it, we're gonna be just going around the mountain until it's too late. These guys have worked hard. They've turned their lives around, and all they need is an opportunity.
Wow.
And the problem is also,
go ahead.
Just one other thing is that the families of these ex-offenders are sometimes very unforgiving as well. And we've got a lot of ex-offenders currently sleeping rough, where to live, nothing to eat. And that's another problem we have to address as a society.
So Mr. Dowden, based on when they come out and they have these lack of opportunities as you have described it, can this be, we talked with Madupe earlier about the high level of recidivism, can this be a direct factor into why some prisoners reoffend? Because when they come out, it's just so hard to readjust, no matter how many rehabilitation programs you've been able to give them while they were making that move out?
Exactly. If a man comes out of prison, he's got nowhere to live, he's got nowhere to eat, he's got no money, then what does he do? With all the goodwill in the world, what does he do? And unfortunately, our system would send them out of prison. Some of the guys don't even have an ID card to go and cash a check. So they come out of prison not equipped to go back into society.
Wow. Madupe, I want to bring you back in on this conversation because I think it is extremely relevant to what we were talking about a little bit earlier. The opportunities or the lack thereof for offenders and as we mentioned, the direct 68%, 67%, as you said, recidivism rate. So what then is, the whole title of the program is Life After Incarceration. So what are prisoners then to do in order to survive or in order to make a living in society?
I think it's more what do we do as a society? As we said, they've paid their dues, they've come back out, so how do we provide that support? So yes, we want to have the rehabilitation before they re-enter, so we want that through care before we have the aftercare. We need to prepare them for that life on the other side. So we have to have those structures in place as it relates to housing, simple necessities, as Mr. Dowden mentioned just now, having something to eat, being able to have a bath. So we need to strengthen those aftercare structures and make sure that they're in place so that persons don't relapse into criminal behavior.
Mr. Dowden, your thoughts on that, about what Madupe just said about the society? How as we as a society prepare ourselves, because they're doing a lot to prepare themselves to come back to us, but we are not doing much to prepare to welcome them back. How can we make that shift?
Well, unfortunately, it's going to take a total shift from government, corporate, barbarians, everyone. I don't want it to seem as though it's all gloom and doom, because we've worked hard with the government to help these guys, because the youth entrepreneurship scheme, as a part of prison fellowship, we've referred a lot of ex-offenders to the youth entrepreneurship scheme program, and they have been successful because we've got a direct link, and we met and we make sure we form this link so we can help some of them with plans and business plans. But not every ex-offender will have a business plan. And the problem is they had one, sometimes they need help to create and write it, which is a service that we perform. But also, so I'm not saying it's all gloom or doom. They're little tiny steps that we take it, but we've got to really hit the problem head on, and it's changing culture. It's how we see incarceration. I mean, as you were the offense of wandering, etc. And sometimes our penal system, we need to look at things like community service or different things so that we take away some of the stigma from prison. Not everybody that does something needs to go up to the prison, but we don't have a good community service system. We don't have a system where these guys could continue to work while they're incarcerated, even so they support their family. Because we're talking about life after prison, but what happens to when a man goes to prison? Children suffer because he's the breadwinner for the house. And a woman goes to prison, the same thing. Children suffer. A whole family is basically destroyed. And that's one of the problems that we see at Prison Fellowship on a daily basis. For instance, going back to school. We've helped over 400 children to get back to school, but because their father is not at home, he's incarcerated. Who looks at that?
Well, Richelle, I know that you're still there. I want you to weigh on this conversation about the lack of opportunities, because you mentioned in your testimony that when you go to job interviews and you tell them about being incarcerated, that the whole tone of the interview shifts and changes. I know that Neil was also talking about that as well. What was that like in terms of what did that do to you when you got that type of response? And while you're getting ready to share that, there is Charmaine Johnson who says, very touching story. I believe that with God's help, those persons can change, and we need to give these persons a second chance in life and not to be so judgmental. Risha? Not hearing you, Richelle. Okay. All right. So while she gets that started, I'll go back now to Neil. Neil, what are some of the current opportunities? Because you said that all is not doom and gloom. What are some of the current opportunities available to ex-offenders?
Well, right now with the youth entrepreneurship scheme, at least they get a chance to start their own business, etc. There's also the trust loan scheme. These things were not into being about 3 or 4 years ago. So what I'm saying, even though it's a small step, we still need that. But what we need to do as well is to take it a step further and sort of have a way we could train these guys even while they're in prison into things like interviewing skills, how to present yourself, preparing business proposals, business plans. Our banks have got to be a bit more open to these guys, and not because you would have a criminal record don't mean that you can't get an overdraft or you can't borrow money to start a business. So it's got to be a whole culture change. It's not only we've got to walk the walk instead of just talking the talk.
Most definitely, Neil. We have Richelle back. Richelle, we were talking about the interviews. We were talking about the interviews and the shift. What did that do to you mentally, or how did that make you feel when you go to interviews and the mood just shifts after you tell them that you were incarcerated?
It makes you feel despondent. It makes you feel that you're not enough. But then there's the will and the determination to prove everybody wrong, that you are good enough, that you are enough, that you can do something.
Wow, very, very, very touching. And that goes back to Neil's point and Charmaine's when she commented and said that we are a judgmental society, and probably we have to take a real look at ourselves and to be a little more forgiving, given that people have paid their dues to society. So of course we want to talk solutions. And one of those solutions may be diversionary programs rather. Madupe, what would you say are some of from a research perspective, maybe from Barbados or different countries, what are some of the successes of introducing diversionary programs?
Again, as Neil would have mentioned, everything doesn't warrant detention. Everything doesn't have to be the government industrial school or the prison. Let's see how we can tackle that offending behavior so that we reroute the young persons away from the juvenile justice system and older persons from our criminal justice system. So holistic diversionary programs. So tackle the issues, tackle the substance abuse, tackle the educational deficits. Let's involve the home situation. Let's involve the families. Let's involve, for those who are incarcerated, let's involve the children in that process. So that, as I said, there's that holistic element. I mentioned earlier we have a lot of generally angry young people out there. Let's tackle this aggressive behavior. We have many organizations that run conflict resolution programs. So things like that need to be promoted. But if we think about those that have already made contact with the system, they may not be incarcerated. Again, let's see how we can improve their way of life. So is it education we're going to look at? Neil spoke about preparing them for the world of work. Simple things like how do you write an application letter? Yeah, so it needs to be a total holistic approach if we're going to arrest the type of delinquent behaviors that we're seeing.
Most definitely. And as we are winding down, I still want to hear from the public. And if you want to, you can make your commentary on our Facebook pages, or you can give us a call at 228-5562 or 228-5563. And Charmaine Johnson says these programs should start when they're still incarcerated, not wait until they come out, then try to figure it out. So, Richelle, I'm going to come to you because who better to hear what is a better program or what may work better than somebody who has experienced, who has lived? Because sometimes we speak about things that we haven't necessarily experienced, and it may not, necessarily be the best solution. So I want to hear from you, Richelle, in terms of diversionary programs. We may say, and it may sound good, but what practically can we do to really steer young people away from committing the offenses in the first place?
I may not be able to speak on what can be done to stop young people from committing offenses due to the fact that people do things for different reasons. Mm-hmm. What may work for me may not work for you. That is just the human being. We are very complex. So more programs are tailored for the majority, and there's that one does not fit in to that particular mold. That is just the way life is and societies are. But for me, I find the one thing missing from this entire plan is the voice of the offender. Everybody knows what the offenders need. Everybody knows what the offender wants, but nobody offender. After serving 12 years in prison, I don't want a job in my first. It's not practical. And it's not practical because I don't even know how to answer a phone. I don't know. To go into a supermarket is frightening. To be able to sit down and interact with friends and family, to be able, when I want to be able to turn on and off a light switch, those things are so new. I can only speak for myself. Those things were very new to me. So for me, when I went into the world of work, when I first came home, within the first 2 to 3 months, I was employed. And it was hard for me because I was now learning how to reintegrate. So in the pressures of reintegrating myself, then conform to the workplace, the pressure was a bit much. So I feel like there needs to be the chance for the offender to say what assists. Because everybody says, oh, they need work. they also need the social skills to cope, because it's very depressing. It's very hard to come from spending so much time away from a society to step back into a society where things have changed, people have changed, you have changed, and people are expecting you to be this person. So then when you don't fit into the stereotype, or you don't fit into the mold that these people had of you before, how do you cope with that? How do they cope with that? How does your family understand that? The thing, like for me, for instance, my family lives in fear, and I guess that's normal. They don't understand. I was never aggressive, I was never violent, but that was the nature of my crime.
Mm-hmm.
In talking to me, every time we have a conversation, is like, so you gonna kill me now? And I say, well, where did that come from?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people don't know how to interact and how to cope with people that would have been incarcerated, and then they aren't allowed to be angry. If you were charged for an aggravated
Yeah.
offense, for anything, not allowed to express anger, because then it means you will injure someone else. You don't have the right to be loud. You don't have the right to just express yourself as a human being, because people live in fear. They may not say it to you, but by their actions and by extension their reactions, by the things that they say, you know that they have that little nagging, wonder what will happen here.
Mm.
So like, these organizations are doing a good job, but they need to bring in the voice of the offender. So because you can't meet the needs of a person that you don't know. So I don't know how we are all creating these programs and there have not been needs assessments. They have done needs assessments due to statistics, not due to practically, not due to watching the livelihood of the offender, because it should be a place when you first come home, you live in a space by yourself to readjust. Your family should be able to visit you at periods of time for you to get accustomed to having your freedom again,
Mm.
to understand the freedom. People that were locked up for 25 years that never pay a bill in their life, how do we expect them to conform? Like,
A
how
lot of
it is
questions there,
like,
Rachel.
it's a lot of questions, because it's like that is
Yeah, a lot of things,
that
but it's
yeah,
so
that's
much to
the
unpack and so little time because we basically really now started to dig deep into this conversation and we are almost out of time already. So I'm going to ask Mr. Neil, Madupe, and yourself, Richelle, to give us a very short closing remark because very unfortunate we are out of time. So Neil, I'll start with you. Life after incarceration for this Listen Up Accord series. What is your last word to Barbadians?
My last words is that having listened to Rochelle and a lot of people like her, a lot of ex-inmates like her, I think the government should be looking at a transition house or transition area before people are released back into society. And while they're in this transition area, we should then try to make links with families, etc., so that when we put them back into society, they've got a support system. Rachel has a support system with her families and friends, but not every inmate that comes out is that fortunate. And that's part of the problem. So we need to ensure that we try to fix some of the problems that we've seen before we let these ex-inmates on the street. And that will go far away. So if you know that you're sentenced to 25 years, when you're about to come out, the last 2 years you should be moved out of Dodds and put in somewhere preparing you to go back into society and make a meaningful contribution.
Wow, Mr. Dowden, that is extremely powerful. This program definitely has been enlightening for me, and I'm pretty sure that based on the comments that we've been seeing, that has been enlightening for others. But unfortunately, we are out of time, and we've come to the end of our show. Madupe, 20 seconds, very very quickly. Your final thoughts.
I do endorse Neil's comments. I fully support them. Rochelle, I hear you. As we do our research, as I said, we are going to try to drill down to the roots. What is causing a young girl to wander? What's causing boys to get into fights, these violent fights? So with our research, we want to be a lot more targeted so that we can better inform the type of programs that are put out there, and we definitely are including the voice of those that are directly involved.
Rochelle, 10 seconds, your last word.
My last words are just don't let this be a fly-by-night program. Please, please, please get work. Get something that works. We need it.
Thank you so much, Rochelle. Thank you so much, Madupe. Thank you so much, Neil. We want to thank all of you who made this show possible today. We want to thank our panelists. We want to thank you, the viewers. We want to thank our sponsors. And the crew here at CBC who have worked very hard with us to get this show. It has been a pleasure bringing you the first of this Listen Up Accord series. We want to encourage you to continue to comment. The most engaging comment will win that staycation for two, and we will be announcing that winner on the Facebook page of the Division of Youth. And we are encouraging you as well to join our multi-faith service tomorrow, which will be shown right here on CBC TV 8. For the first of this Listen Up Accord series, we want to thank you for joining us for the first of this Listen Up Accord series, and we're letting you know that you can check us right here again next week, the same time. Until then, stay safe.